Hello, strong soul. Great to see you in another moment of the now. Um, Today's transmission, very powerful, lots of insight, and it's for remember. It's for a particular few. So if you're new, welcome, and if you're regular, you'll know that not all messages are meant for all people at the same time. These messages are timeless. So whether they fit for you now, later, or even never, just feel free to discern for yourself. And if it's not for you, enjoy the scrolling and let this message get to whoever's meant for. Without further ado, this is meant for a few in the crew that are going through some sort of existential rebirth. And maybe we'll dive a little bit deeper into that to even know what does that mean, because sometimes it feels that our lives are falling apart. Sometimes it can be a lot very dramatic and it be very clear, like being fired from a long time job or going through some sort of separation or a loss or something very traumatic. And sometimes it can be very subtle. It can be like an internal collapse of the sense of the self. So in either way, it can be just like some sort of existential crisis. And like I said, it can be happening outwards, which it's kind of pushing you through some sort of transition, or it can be going inwards, a silent one that you're internalizing. And a lot of people from the outside would be like, oh no, they're fine. And on the inside, you're collapsing. So um, different ways to approach this from the soul collective and from a place of strength and evolution. We see this as an opportunity for a rebirth. So when something collapses, it could be the end of that or the making of something better. So that's where we're headed. And I want to share with you some of the pointers that I have in order to guide you, offer some humble guidance, some validation, and a lot of motivation for you to own this process instead of trying to avoid it or patch it or cover the sun with one finger. Just own it. Own that you are going through an existential crisis, like I said. Yet it could be a crisis or it could be a rebirth if you decide to take charge of what's happening, in the sense that you may not be responsible for all the circumstances or the factors happening around you, yet you are in charge of your attitude and how you approach it. Not It's not necessary for you to do a lot of things. It's more like owning it in your own vibration, like sitting firmly, right? Like feeling your feelings, feeling your body, feeling the weight of your body, feeling your breath, not trying to run away from this moment, wishing it was the past or this wouldn't have happened, or wishing it was the future and that you were already over this, yet owning the present moment. There's nothing to fear. There's nowhere to run, right? And then once we own that frequency, nobody can take away what's yours. And you stop running away from discomfort because you know you can own it. You know that the more you take charge of it consciously, the better the outcome, because you become the architect of the outcome, right? If something's happening, you're like, oh, I don't want to be there. And then you come back and they put it together in the wrong way. There's just so much you can do. But if you stay in it, you get to decide how things come back together. So, with regards to a bit of a, like I said, this would be maybe one or more videos if this is a topic that you're interested in. But this is more or less what I mean with an existential rebirth. It's the other side of the fear, the other side of the trauma, the drama, the crisis is like, why is this happening? Why is this collapsing on me? Why am I collapsing within myself, right? Sometimes it's, like I said, it can be more subtle, not so subtle, whereas you had a career path or a dream, or you go through something and you start questioning, why are you doing what you're doing? Why did you do what you did? What are you going to do? Who are you? Right? Like maybe you identified yourself with something that you were pursuing and it took a turn and you're like, who am I without this work or without this person or without this project or without this dream? So, like I said, the existential rebirth takes various levels, and it also depends on the degree of self-awareness that you are, where you're in the journey, because there may be things that are more relevant to you at the time. So remember that these transmissions, I try to keep them general because everybody's playing out their own story. Everybody has their own characters, their own lessons. So things that may be relevant for one person may not be super relevant for the other person, right? So I leave it up to you to discern, how does this existential rebirth looks to you? What area of your life, if not them all, because sometimes one of the legs of the table collapses, it brings everything down. Sometimes, it's an isolated event, so I leave that up to you. But I can bet that if you take a deeper dive, you'll realize that this is bigger than what you want to make it out to be, but we just want to minimize it, right? It's like, oh, it's not a big deal, or this is just temporary. And it's like, what if it was a big deal and it was for the best? What if your old house is collapsing, for you to look at other opportunities to move into a bigger space, a space that you've always dreamt for you to stop settling, or for you to stop committing to something that might have been valuable 10 years ago, but right now there's better opportunities. Like, you've passed the apprenticeship, like, congratulations, you did it, right? It's like if you're in a doctorate's degree and then you're up for graduation and you're like, oh no, but that means I have to turn in my thesis, and that means that I'm not going to be a student anymore. Is that the worst? Like, we're always going to be students and apprentices of life, yet there's an opportunity where life is like, okay, you're ready to teach, or you're ready to take a lead, or you're ready to level up. There's a lot more to come. Like, all of the crafts and skills that you've built throughout these experiences are going to add up, right? But it's up to you to choose if you take charge of the situation, like I said, and you take over and make it a rebirth, or it's just like an existential death. And you're like, that's that for me. I'm just gonna wait till I die. And I know that's a little bit gruesome, but sometimes we need to extend things, or like be a little bit more dramatic in order just to get that contrast. Being like, yeah, maybe it's not the end of the world. Maybe it is. And then what's after that? What's after the end of the world? I guess a lot of us are here to see that, if not to be part of the creation of what that looks like, right? Because nobody, part of what comes around with the existential rebirth and owning it, is that nobody else is going to come and save you. Nobody else is going to come and craft you and develop your character the way you can. Like, you can get assistance, you can get support, of course, but nobody else can do what you're meant to do for yourself. So it is up to you and no one else. Again, there's a crew, there's support, of course, there's support, there's systems in place. Yet only you can do for you what you're meant to do for you. It's a little bit redundant, but like, here's a validation, because sometimes people doubt themselves, and that's why we're here, to reflect to each other that we are capable of doing what we're meant to be doing. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, we would be somebody else. It's vibrational, right? So, coming down to that, no one else is coming to save you, in the sense that nobody else can be you but you, and nobody else can get to know you the way you get to know yourself. So it's going within, throughout this whole process. Know that all of this is highly supported with crystal blessings. What does this mean? More than a spiritual, abstract, wishful thinking, it's more like crystal clear consciousness is coming your way, where your consciousness is expanding. Throughout an existential rebirth, your current structure breaks down, and as scary or troublesome as that may be, it also opens up your view. It opens up your mind, and you're like, wow, okay, I was so comfortable in this lane, and now that everything is collapsed, I can see there's more lanes. Oh wow. And there's even like part of the matrix that is like unscripted, untouched, right? So there's all of these opportunities, and sometimes that can be paralyzing because it's uncertain. Yet at the same time, if you know that you're the architect of your life and you have skills and gifts to be the best version of yourself, all that takes is going to be work and dedication to crystallize yourself, to crystallize the way you see yourself. And when you become very clear either of what you are or what you're not, you begin to take action accordingly. So I know this is a little bit vague, so let's bring it down. But I wanted to say, like, for those who resonate, there's crystal blessings in the sense that you're going to be able to foresee yourself a lot more clearly and be less fearful of like, oh my God, what am I going to do without this job? Well, maybe pursue your gifts and your real passions. And then you're going to develop that crystal view or visibility with regards to yourself, seeing yourself for who you truly are, not just who you thought you were. So there's those blessings. There's a lot of like clarity coming through as well. Yet we have to be lined up to see it. Remember, this is all based on free will. So it's a choice. If you want to, of course. If you don't want to, or you're not ready, the game will adjust accordingly, if you may. So from here, once you realize, okay, this is happening, so what do we do? This is for the people that may be going through some sort of disappointment or self-pity or regrets, right? Memories are in the way of like, oh, this used to be like this and now it's not, or I thought it was going to be this way. Again, we're like either in the past or the future or both. So it's okay. Let's just acknowledge that. Let's just begin to accept that we may not be present, because the present may be a little bit hard to swallow right now, because it's not looking maybe what it used to or what we wish it would have. Yet again, I'm telling you, there's new opportunities, there's new features. It's just like if you're like, oh, my phone doesn't work like it used to 15 years ago. It's like, no, maybe we've lost some features on the way, right, throughout the updates, yet there's improvements to come. And then the more engaged we are, the more we can make the most out of these upgrades. So for this, as you recognize what's making you disappointed, the self-pity and the regrets, you can begin to come to terms with what is and what is not, right? And again, I do feel from one perspective that disappointment is voluntary. There's being hurt, being trespassed, things not being met. Yet disappointment is like a bit of a choice of how do I choose to see the situation. One thing is like, okay, I'm really hurt and I'm going to process that. Yet choosing to be disappointed means like maybe I was trying to control an outcome or I had expectations on a situation. Of course, it's human to have expectations, but to what degree am I going to let something bitter me or poison me? I was served poison. Okay, that's like concerning, right? And I could be disappointed, or I could also choose to overcome that situation. So just mind how long you stay in a state of disappointment, because nobody's going to change things for you unless you change your attitude. So do mind staying in disappointment, because sometimes disappointment is just covering up for an emotion that we don't want to feel. It's easier to say, I'm so disappointed about that person, rather than being vulnerable and being like, I'm super hurt. And now I'm probably going to have to set boundaries and distance myself from them because they're hurting me, right? I'm not putting the blame on them, not being disappointed on them. I'm just acknowledging that their behavior is not conducive to my mental or emotional well-being, or even physical, right? So it hurts. It hurts to have to set boundaries when we actually love that person and maybe we wanted them closer in our lives. So again, do you see the difference? Because with disappointment, I can just like cook regret and bitterness for the rest of my life. Whereas if I just go into the vulnerable pain point and I address that, it does take more courage. It does take more vulnerability, but then I don't get to poison myself with disappointment every morning, whenever I think of that person. I don't get to poison myself again. I'm just like, yeah, I have to distance. I have to create distance, because sometimes even we love them, but we have to love them at a distance, because if they're too close, it causes a short circuitry. And again, this could be with a person, with a situation, professionally, romantically, family related. I leave that up to you to discern. So from here, it does take personal strength. It will require personal strength. And fortunately, it's a muscle. It's something that you work moment by moment. You don't have to tackle right now everything in your life and just like be strong and do something. Sometimes inaction, mindful inaction, in the sense of taking time to rest, taking time to process what's happening, resting profoundly can sometimes be more productive than doing more of what's not working. And again, nobody's saying drop everything. It's more like, so start slowing down, start processing how the situation is making you feel, right? Instead of trying to rush through things and like pump more work in order to prevent you from seeing that a crisis is happening or that a rebirth is around the corner, maybe just take some more time to slow down and process. And it takes strength to slow down. It takes courage to see things for what they are. It's easier to just be like, it is what it is, brush it off, continue, repress it, suppress it. It'll go into the tissues, and in a few years, we'll be handling weird condition that came out of nowhere. So again, maybe I'm covering too many tabs, but just putting that out there if it resonates for some. So the idea with personal strength is to overcome the obstacles and know that you can overcome any obstacle as long as you believe in yourself. And again, this is a muscle, because maybe we stopped doing that a long time ago. But the more you believe in yourself, the stronger you stay within your vibration, the more you slow down. I'll tell you, it's very uncomfortable at the beginning. But once you start building up the resilience to stay within this more vulnerable states of being, you stop running away from things. You stop being afraid of people hurting you, or you stop being afraid of people betraying or situations being disappointing, because you're like, I have what it takes to put out the fire. I'm going to stop running away. And then again, you go from a crisis into a rebirth, into an opportunity to recreate your life, to recognize yourself at a deeper level. And this is where the victory comes through. This is where your willpower pays off. And this is where ambition will take you very, very far. And ambition, I would say, comes along with vision, right? It's up to you to develop a clear vision that keeps you ambitious, that keeps you like, this is who I am. This is who I want to be, or this is who I am already. And I'm cultivating myself in the process, right? It's just like a seed for any sort of plant already has the potential to be the fruit. It's just the labor that will get us there so that we can harness the fruit. So recap from here, it's there's an existential rebirth going on. Something shifted, something is coming. It could have been sudden, or it could have been in the making. It could have been like 15 years in the making almost. And this is good. This is good. Own it. Own it. I commend you to own it, to know that all of this is for an evolutionary process. And if when things come to an end, it means that a new beginning is around the corner. And a new beginning means new opportunities, new perspectives, new features, new updates, new upgrades, like great things around. And it just takes your personal strength, your self awareness to stay present in the moment, stop ruminating in the past, stop projecting into the future, stay in the present. Overcome the obstacles by believing that you're capable of going through whatever you're going through because it's vibrational, whether you love it or not. A lot of the times we prefer not to do the dishes, right? But how nice it is to have a new clean batch of dishes for your next meal. So it's a little bit of like housekeeping, right? Everybody would rather just like leave the kitchen and come back and everything is magically taken care of. And sometimes that happens, but you get the metaphor that I'm saying. At some point, you're going to have to do your dishes. Um, and with this, the action steps moving forwards is mainly to redefine a stable ground for yourself. What does this mean? That whatever brought you stability in the past may not work in the future, right? It's like we were sailing and now we've seen land and we're landing. So the mechanisms for navigating in water and getting to know your unknown territory are going to be completely different. You're in a very different scenario, and you could be like, "Oh no, my times navigating the seas has ended." It's like, no, you learned all of those skills so that you can move into the next step. So again, I want to highlight how this existential rebirth is for the best. It's a matter of also minding your clinginess, clinging on to something from the past. Like, oh, this used to bring me so much joy, or I used to love this. How did it come to this? And it's like, do see the evolutionary process. It's like kids, they grow. Oh my God, like you see a baby shoe and you're like, oh my God, they used to fit in this shoe. How disappointing. You know, there's these parents that get upset because their kids are growing. And I'm like, that was one of the fixed rules. What were we expecting? And I'm not saying it's not emotional, and I'm not saying we don't go through a process and grieve and whatnot, but at the same time, it's like the less we try to control things, the more we'll enjoy the next stages, because then the next thing you know is the kids are even older and they need you even less, but you were like ruminating in when they were babies. You see what I mean? So I know there's a few ideas out there, but the idea is to redefine your stable ground. You need to change shoes, right? Not just your kids. We all need to change shoes, and we need to redefine what that looks like. You don't need to keep buying the same shoes because they used to work. Maybe they're out of production. Maybe you need to reconfigure what stability feels for you, because that's also something that the mind gets stuck in old habits. We're creatures of habit. And sometimes we still go back to what used to give us comfort, even though if that's outdated. So that's what the existential rebirth is. It's like there's better things out there for you. There's more authentic ways for you to live. You don't have to keep using the old recipes or the old ways that you didn't even choose for yourself in the first place. So the whole point here is, as you redefine the stable ground, bring mindfulness to try to stop controlling and just try to accept it. And I'm saying this as a friend, as a patient zero, right? Like sometimes we think it was for the best, but we are really just trying to control the outcome. We're just trying to control. And it's very different to create than to control. The creative puts things in place and they roll with the creative energies. And if something goes wrong, they'll be able to turn it around, right? It's like surfing. There's not a rule, but there's a flow. But you don't try to control the waves. If you get very tight, you're going to fall from the board. So it's the same thing. Is that you're riding the wave in a creative manner. You're riding the wave of life instead of trying to control how it's going to go and where you're going to land and where it's going to end. And if you really want to do that, I'm just going to tell you, it gets tougher and tougher and tougher. And then it goes into your muscles, and then it goes into your biological unconscious, and then a lot of things begin to be reflected upon your body, because energies have to go somewhere. So the more aware you are of your mental rigidities and your patterns and your behaviors, the faster it is. Way easier to adjust something in the subtle realms, like in your mind, than in the physical one, right? Well, and we could go into some explorations there, but the point is, if you catch yourself before you begin to create habits, or before you keep repeating habits, then you can catch yourself and begin to course correct. So from here, as you redefine your new stable ground. That's where the existential rebirth is like you are rebirthing within this life. So it's amazing because you have all of the awareness, all of the skills, all of the consciousness that you've cultivated up until now, and you get to have a rebirth, a conscious one. You get to give birth to a new version of yourself. um, and here, a lot of people feel like they've lost something. They get very, like I said, disappointed, nostalgic. But they were really, up until now, a lot of them were hollow victories, were things that you might have been pursuing for reasons that are not relevant right now. Like maybe they were super valid 10 years ago when you started that project, and the project took you to where you are. And the project is fulfilling you the way it was 10 years ago, but you've grown. So you want more than that. And you're like, oh, why isn't this as fulfilling? It is. It's still equally fulfilling. It's just you've leaped. You've taken a leap. So now there's more for you at hand. So mind that anything that is in discord or is not truly fulfilling the purpose may collapse. There may be some destruction, and this is where the existential crisis comes in, because it's not being held by the vibration anymore. It doesn't fit fully. So whatever is not relevant may collapse. And instead of seeing it as a loss, you have new ground to build. You have a new capacity to take care of yourself. So this all goes back to our urge to control. So mind that. And there's this nostalgia, there's this melancholy. I get that part. So we just want to soften the punch of the rebirth, and just mind the lack of compromise to yourself, because a lot of the stuff that you might have achieved up until now was built on compromise for sure, but yet maybe on an obsolete version of yourself. So what the universe is inviting you to is to redefine yourself. And that's terrifying, because you could be like, oh, but I've been building this for 10 years. Yeah, and it paid off, and it gave you the platform that you have right now in order to take off the next level. And where will you be in another 10 years if you actually choose to take the risks that you chose 10 years ago? It's not just like, oh, I took a risk 15 years ago and then that should pay off for the rest of my life. Times are shifting. Things are evolving. We constantly need to reinvent ourselves. And again, I know that from one degree, it may sound like very draining. Doesn't mean that you have to act all the time. It means that you also have to learn how to slow down so that you can, if from one perspective, download what's to come. You don't have to just guess or jump right into it. It's more like as you slow down and you really process what has been, where you at, the next steps, I can almost guarantee, are going to unfold in front of you, because you're going to realize from everything that you've done what worked the best, what do you want to continue with, and what you're ready also to cut off or drop. Like you don't have to carry everything just because you have been carrying it. So this went a little bit longer than expected. There was just a lot of intel. Existential rebirth is not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. And it's not just empty words here, be like, oh, Nate, you got this. We believe in you. Like I said, it's not empty promises. It's not empty prayers. It's more like giving you some ground for you to be able to reflect on something more concrete with regards to yourself. Telling you that it's okay to take some time to stabilize, right? Like if you need to stabilize a car, you won't do it on the go. You would like stop, park, and then do some testing before you go on another ride. So do take your time to process things. Take your time to go within. If there's anything that resonates or any advice that you would like to share with the crew, please feel free to start a conversation. Or if there's anything else in your mind that you would just like to share, never hesitate to share, because you never know. There's always people that are starting behind us, and there's always people ahead of us lighting up the way. And then that way we kind of help each other out in our own stories. So with regards to existential births, we'll leave it up until here. Thank you so much for your presence, for your attention. And as for me, I will see you in another moment of the now.